I've heard a lot of people criticize Stephen King for being rambly, for going on lots of tangents that are unnecessary, and having read about 10 to 15 of his books, both old and new, I never really got that until this one, and yet I still gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. Stay tuned to find out why. So first and foremost, what is The Shining about? Even if you've never read a Stephen King book before, you've probably heard of this one because there's been a movie of it, and it's probably considered one of King's best books by a lot of fans. It was one of the earliest ones. It was published in 1977. It's about a family who go to this hotel. The dad, Jack Torrance, gets a job as a winter caretaker for this hotel called the Overlook, and his family, consisting of his wife Wendy and his son Danny, live there with him over the winter time. Danny, it turns out, has some psychic abilities. He can read minds, he can read emotions, and he also seems to sometimes see things that aren't there or have precognitions. For example, he can find things, he knows things he shouldn't know. As Jack delves into the hotel's very long, very storied and bloody history, strange things begin to happen in the hotel. People who stayed there, worked there, and even died there are being seen by first Danny and later his parents. As the weather gets worse, they lose contact with the outside world, and the 3 of them deliberate whether to leave or stay as the situation seemingly becomes more and more dire, and not just as a result of the paranormal happenings here. In fact, as the book progresses, it almost feels like Jack Torrance himself is more of a threat to the others than the supernatural phenomena that they encounter in the hotel. As the story delves into the events that led to Jack ending up with this job, his past as an alcoholic, his troubled history at home as a child, and his struggles with himself, especially when it comes to being a father to Danny. So, what are my thoughts on this book? How can I love it when I said that this book finally made me see the flaws that people say that Stephen King has? Well, that's just it. It was pretty good, but at times the plot put on the brakes to go off on some tangent, whether it was about Jack Torrance's past, some kind of incident, or something that might not even be really relevant to the plot, but just to illustrate some point. But it spent too long there, and so you actually almost forgot, or at times I even did forget, where we were before we took this diversion. Normally I really like books that take these kinds of time to explore characters and themes and build up why they are. And yes, a lot of these tangents do pay off in the latter half of the book, but the first half of the book is so riddled with these tangents that it's kind of poorly paced. It very much disrupts the pacing. However, that for me was the book's only flaw, and as I got further in, again past the halfway point, it was easier to forgive those flaws and see why this book is considered the classic that it is, both as a Stephen King book and as a horror/paranormal book in general. The build-up is great. As I said, the tangents, irksome as they are at the time that you're reading them, do pay off. And I liked the feeling that the paranormal things in this hotel weren't necessarily the only sort of villain. I like how Jack Torrance himself almost felt like the villain, the actual villain of the story at times. And sometimes he felt even more threatening than the paranormal things, even when those were building up, becoming more frequent, and to the point that Jack and Wendy became aware of them as well. Another thing that I found a bit bizarre to read was these sections. I don't quite know how to explain it, but where you have this text in brackets that's like the character's mind sort of screaming out or expressing their thoughts from a first person perspective, but it doesn't really, it just feels weird and jarring, and I get why it's there, and it would feel a bit more forced, a bit more artificial, I admit, if it did say whatever the thought was, thought Danny, and then this and that happened. Sometimes though, like when one of the characters is having one of these hallucinations or visions, and you have this weird in brackets text, I don't know, maybe it's because I haven't read anything, at least not off the top of my head, where you see that, where that's common. It's common to express those kind of thoughts and experiences in that way. But it was a bit weird when you kind of had this back and forth of normal text and then this hallucination or mental screaming, and then back to normal text or normal dialogue. This back and forth was a bit weird to read. In summary, in spite of its flaws, I definitely understand after reading it why this book is considered the classic that it is. The plot was simple, the characters were interesting, and you didn't need a lot of them. Aside from the 3 family members, there was only one other character that was really integral to the story, and he was also pretty likeable. While the first half is riddled with tangents and detours, which, as I said, disrupt the flow quite a bit, they are forgivable once you hit the book's second half and they start to pay off. The book has a simple premise, a small, manageable cast of characters, and it does with them what it sets out to do really well. The quote-unquote villains feel menacing, especially with the close proximity, and the fear that comes when your demons wear the faces of the people that you love. With that said, please like and subscribe, and of course, do lots of maths, read lots of books, and I'm sure you'll have a nice, normal, spook-free day.